Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Rausen Pereira. Domestic air travel was started after a gap of almost 2 months. The Shramik trains are also running and several states have opened up bus transportation as well. The Ministry of Civil Aviation has come out with a set of guidelines after the domestic skies were opened up on Monday. The guidelines came out on Saturday about how quarantine should be observed and what people should do when they travel from one place to another. However, different states have adapted their own quarantine rules and they differ from state to state. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the different quarantine rules in different states and how should people deal with them. Joining me on the program today are S.C. Tripathi, former Principal Secretary, Uttar Pradesh, P.K. Malhotra, former Law Secretary, Government of India, and K. Badrinath, Senior Journalist. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. Mr. Malhotra, let me begin the program with you. Let me first try and understand, what you make of these different quarantine rules that we have and which has left people perplexed. I mean, people are trying to look up these rules for different states when they're traveling from, say, from an Uttar Pradesh to a Karnataka. They seem to be confused. I mean, what do you make of all of this?
Mr. Frank, I think today's topic you have raised a very, very relevant point, and because people are confused about it and they would definitely like to know what exactly the legal position is and what are the powers of the central government and the state government in this regard. Now, let me put a caveat here that we are dealing with an extraordinary situation which is not peculiar to India, but situation is prevalent throughout the world. And it is a very, very serious problem. And extraordinary situations need to be dealt with extraordinarily. But before that, if we are talking about the legal rights or the constitutional provision or the legal provisions which are available in our country, insofar as the public health, sanitation, hospitals and dispensaries are concerned, it is purely a state subject. We have two important legislations dealing with this subject, and one is of 19th century vintage, which is known as Epidemic Disease Act, and generally Epidemic Disease Act of 1897, which is generally administered by the state government. And then we have the 21st century legislation, which is known as the Disaster Management Act of 2005. But before that, since you talked about the movement of people, migrants, as well as the movement of aircraft, railways and public transport, all these subjects, they fall within list 1, which is a union list. So, talking about the power taking decision is concerned, central government as well as state government both are authorized to take decisions or make laws in accordance with the power given to them under the federal structure which we are talking of. But here I would like to put a caveat, because in such an extraordinary situation, you have to be the best example of cooperative federalism which we have seen in the past as and when there has been crisis in our country. But what has happened that during the current phase to deal with this kind of pandemic, when the WHO declared it, of course the central government as an experiment for one day imposed a Janata curfew, and after that there was a total shutdown. Probably the people kind of movement which they expected was not available to them, time to move was not made available to them, and initially people thought that this will be over within 21 days. But the situation didn't permit it, it went on aggravated, and after that aggravation it has to be extended. Now, in such a scenario, as I said, there has to be a proper cooperative federalism where state and the center exercising its power under the Disaster Management Act or the Epidemic Diseases Act has to take action in coordination with each other. But that coordination somehow was seen lacking because of the delegation given by the central government to the state government to deal with the situation depending upon their local conditions. I think that created a sort of problem. But talking about the Disaster Management Act, let me say there is a very good scheme available under the Disaster Management Act, whereby the Central Executive Committee, the National Executive Committee, headed by the Home Secretary, it gives a direction to all the authorities within the center as well as to the state government as to what steps need to be taken. In accordance with those directions, the state government as well as the district authorities are required to take action to meet such a contingency so that there is minimum casualty. If people are to be moved, how they are to be moved. If they are to be rehabilitated, how they are to be rehabilitated. If food is to be arranged for them, how that food is to be arranged. All these guidelines can be provided. So to that extent, so far as the legal provision is concerned, legal provisions are strong enough, but the problem arose only because of lack of coordination and its implementation by the states. Some of the states had their own view because the law empowers them to make a law, but they must realize once the central agency has issued a direction, they must comply with those directions. And in case they want to deviate from any of them, then they must discuss with the central authority first and only then make this kind of deviation. Now, having different type of quarantine rule, I just try to finish it. Having a different kind of quarantine rule, state governments probably they have a right under the Act of 1897, and therefore they issued this kind of direction. But they forgot that movement of the people as well as railways, civil aviation and transport, probably that fall within the domain of the central government. If central government has permitted it, probably there was a need of better coordination between the state and central government to see that the kind of situation which has emerged and which you are talking about, one nation, different rule for quarantine, would not have arisen.
Okay, all right. So, Mr. Tripathi, this is where I'd like to bring you in. You served at the highest level really in the state government as well, and you served at the highest level in the central government as well. How would you look at this entire situation? I mean, do we leave it to the states to decide at the end of the day, because they are the ones who are getting the work done, the last mile work, it's all happening there, and they are the ones who are getting everything sorted out. Do you look at it that way, or how would you look at it?
It's a very strange and funny situation. I have also been district magistrate during the emergency period. So I have that experience as well. But now seeing the conditions today, it seems to me that both in center and in states, once you enjoy control and power, it becomes very difficult to relax. So central government, of course, after 4 lockdowns, or in fact during the 4th lockdown also, has relaxed various things, but now the states are not relaxing because they, from health emergency, the matter has become more like a police control. So it is the policeman on the spot who is deciding whether you can be permitted to go to hospital, whether you can cross one border or not, and of course the states are deciding that even after having done quarantine at one place, if you enter the boundaries of that state, then you have to undergo quarantine, and whether that quarantine will be an institutional quarantine or home quarantine, and if there is an infection, the whole building will be quarantined, or the block will be quarantined, or the entire colony will be quarantined. So states, I think the fear of corona is much more damaging than the corona itself. Every month, about 9 to 10 lakhs people die in India for various reasons, natural causes, etc. So in 3 months, about 30 lakhs would have died. Corona deaths are not even 5,000. But look at the scare which it has caused. Everything is focused on corona. The patients of other diseases are unable to access hospitals. There are so many deaths taking place. And this is all happening in the states. The center is not directing this. In fact, it took about a month for center to realize this. Then they issued a direction that no patient should be denied hospital facility. But the hospitals earlier were not admitting. Then many states were not even allowing doctors from across the border. I stay about 300-400 meters away from Delhi border. And many of the doctors live in Delhi and work in Noida. Many live in Noida, work in Delhi. Even they were not being allowed because the state government was saying that only those who are dealing with corona, only they will be allowed to enter. Now, these were very strange situations. Even now, the entire concept of NCR has been thrown out of window. NCR has been one social, cultural, economic entity. But it is very strange because you cannot go to Delhi if you have to work in Delhi, or if you live in Delhi and your work is in Noida, you cannot come here. So these are all happening because the states are under fear of corona, and they have neither the adequate health facilities nor do they know any treatment system. So what they know is they are being directed by the control mechanism that put control everywhere. Now that I think slowly should go away and people should start living their normal life. People have now realized that social distancing, increasing your immunity level, and all these things are important. In fact, last 60 days have been enough to put the fear of God in everybody, and people have become responsible. So I think slowly the states should relax these conditions, and the different quarantine rules. If somebody starts from Bangalore or Bombay, he comes to Delhi and stays in Delhi for a day, then he has to have quarantine in Delhi, and then after 14 days he comes to Noida, he has to have quarantine in Noida. These are very strange things.
Absolutely.
So it's not funny anymore, but it is quite strange. And this is all fear psychosis. I am not saying that they are doing it to punish people. They are doing it because they don't have any clear, system of treatment before them, and they are very scared that what will happen if the infection, gets transmitted
Right.
here, there, everywhere. So that is the situation. I think they should come out of this fear psychosis.
Absolutely. All right. So, K. Padina, taking the discussion forward, I mean, I want to take this point that Mr. Tripathi just made. It's a very interesting point. I mean, you open up the skies, you say, okay, trains are going to be available. Okay, we're going to have inter-district transportation. And suddenly when a person reaches from point A to point B, he's not sure, or he realizes, okay, he's flown, he's paid 30,000 rupees to get from one destination to the other, and he can't go home. He's been waiting for 2 months to go back home, and suddenly he realizes he's asymptomatic. The tests come out negative, and then he still has to undergo quarantine for 14 days. So I mean, it's self-defeating, isn't it? The purpose.
Well, see, different states have followed different rules and regulation, but broadly they are in conformity with the ICMR guidelines, that the Indian Council for Medical Research guidelines. Normally, they are saying that okay, if you are even there is slight symptom of coronavirus, you have to go through 14 days quarantine. Yes, either it is institutional quarantine or you want to be, restricted to your home and all that. Some states have even, prescribed 6 weeks. And there are states which have not even allowed trains to get into their state. For example, yesterday, Kerala has denied a train which is coming from Maharashtra to enter its state because the migrant labor from Maharashtra may be bringing in the coronavirus. So, point I'm trying to say is that every state is trying to develop its own, drill or protocol for dealing with the coronavirus. Say, for example, Uttar Pradesh. Uttar Pradesh says that, okay, any migrant labor or anyone who is coming to Noida or anywhere, he has to go through a thermal testing, then you have to go through, minor swab tests and all that. And then after that, then you have to be 14 days anyway in quarantine. If even there is a slight, this thing. So, there is no harm in taking precaution. But are we overdoing it is the question the two gentlemen seem to be posing. The point is, have we ever faced such a situation where one would decide whether you need 1 week quarantine or 2 weeks quarantine or 6 week quarantine, and which state will have to do what? The Home Ministry guidelines are there. Then you have the ICMR drills. After that, the state seems to be taking its own call depending upon the variability factor that is there in terms of the coronavirus infection. There are some red zones, there are some yellow zones, there are some green zones, there are some containment areas. For example, if we take Delhi, most of the Delhi is almost like a containment zone. So how do you deal with it? Mr. Tripathi is right when he says that, okay, the Noida border is sealed. Even if I'm a journalist and have a valid pass, I may not be able to pass to my office because the thing is closed. So what I'm trying to say is every administration and many of them are run by bureaucrats like Mr. Tripathi or maybe our former law secretary. So they must be taking calls. Obviously, the political leadership would only give you a guideline or would like to only give you some kind of a direction. But finally, it is run by the bureaucrat. My
Okay.
guess is every bureaucrat has his own way of doing it.
Okay, interesting discussion that we are having here. Really, quite a few smiles as well on all our faces. So let's keep that going and let's continue this interesting discussion. So, Mr. Malhotra, firstly, respond to what Mr. Badrinath said, and secondly, of course, what about the right of the individual citizen as well? Because, see, for instance, the people are traveling with the Arogya Setu app. They have a green status. The government has very clearly spoken about how it is important. It's not made it mandatory, but how it is important to have the Arogya Setu app and how it helps everyone around. So if you have a green status, why not allow that person to travel?
Yeah, I think Badrinath raised a very valid point with regard to the implementation of the orders by the bureaucrats. And I think, yes, bureaucracy is meant for that because the politicians are only policy makers. Ultimate implementation is to be done by the bureaucracy. And bureaucracy will be doing it the way they are coming before them from the policy makers. If there are multiplicity of authorities, and every authority is given a handle to tweak with the instructions which are given by a higher authority, there is going to be a chaotic situation. And probably, I think in some of the areas, this is what has happened. And I think Mr. Tripathi will agree with me. Had there been a more clarity from the instructions given by the Central Empowered Committee in the Ministry of Home Affairs, headed by the Home Secretary, which has given the instruction, and they said that each state can further issue the instruction. Now, further issue of the instruction has to be only in conformity with the instruction which has been given by the Home Ministry. You cannot dilute that. But at the same time, if you are making it more strict, and then you are negating the kind of liberty which has been given by a higher authority. Intention of giving liberty to you for implementation is not to negate the instructions given by the higher authority, but to see that how best those instructions can be implemented at the ground level depending on the situation prevailing in a particular district, prevailing in a particular locality, prevailing in a particular area. Probably that has not been taken care of, and as was rightly said, maybe the police authorities were overzealous in implementing the instructions given to them, and therefore some kind of inconvenience was also caused, and maybe sometimes the rights of the individuals were also violated. Now, one point which I would like to make, and Frank, you very rightly said about the rights of the individual. Yes, I think before declaring the lockdown, probably the kind of action which the state governments were required to take with regard to the rehabilitation or maybe providing space to the people who are homeless, who are working in other states, or making arrangement for their food or for their health care, probably that takes a little too longer. And since it takes a little too longer, probably a lot of anxiety was created in the mind of these people. Therefore, they rushed to the bus addas and they rushed to the railway stations and rushed to the airport to catch the transport to go back home. I think that situation could have been avoided had there been a proper coordination. Now, so far as violation of fundamental right is concerned, yes, a reasonable restriction can always be imposed, and the Disaster Management Act empowers the government to impose that kind of restrictions on the individual's right. But yes, if they are going beyond a particular limit, the court will always intervene if somebody imposes, if somebody approaches the court of law. And there are many PILs which have been filed, and even the Supreme Court has also taken notice of it and issued notices to the government as to what steps the government has taken to ensure that those who are migrating from one place to other place, what kind of arrangements are being made, and are they sufficient arrangements in accordance with the law which Parliament has mandated the central government or the state government to make arrangement. If it has not been done, obviously the court will issue direction in that.
Absolutely. So, Mr. Tripathi, so since we are here and since you're talking about these, several of these rules and several of these, measures that each of these states, each of these districts even. Sometimes it changes from district to district depending on who's helming the affairs on the ground there. I mean, you've seen that also happening. Small issues, being permitted in one place, others not being permitted in another, in a neighboring district as well. So what's the best way out? How do we address this issue? How can bureaucrats on the ground who are actually working there solve this particular problem?
You're quite right. From district to district, the situation has not been the same. But the common denominator has been the districts which tended to be a little more liberal. They were also made to become as strict as the neighboring district. You see, a bureaucrat has a tendency to be more conservative and rigid. And then when it is left to the police to implement, then police becomes even more conservative and more strict. It is a health emergency. It is not a disaster of that kind. The health emergency, the health professionals should be in the forefront of implementation, and bureaucracy and police should be in support rather than they come in the forefront and start implementing in only manner they know, as you have seen how the police was treating the various migrants who were traveling rather than being compassionate, the way they were being treated. So, and also it depends, as has been pointed out by Mr. Malhotra, it very much depends on the political leadership. Now, in UP, I was, in fact, before we started, I was jokingly suggesting to Mr. Malhotra that Article 19 should be read every morning in UP Secretariat, because there is a rumor that UP government will not permit persons of UP to go and take employment first to travel. So, and it travels onwards. Then the bureaucrats also start becoming more strict, and thereafter the police, of course, will become even more strict. So I think we have experimented with all these things, and over a period of time now, we should also see the government of India has in fact said that their instructions should not be diluted, but they have not said that their instructions should be so implemented that the spirit of the instructions should get. So that also the government of India should say, because in many places the spirit of the relaxation that the government of India is doing is getting lost, because the way state government have begun to impose their conditions. So that also the government of India should see. And I would say, of course, Mr. Malhotra has said that the courts will intervene. But unfortunately, for more than a month, the courts went in hiding.
Okay, all right. So, there's another aspect in all of this, of course, is that, yeah, go ahead. You wanted to react?
Yes, point is saying that political leadership should take a call, but I would enjoy all the perks is a typical bureaucratic way of doing what you have to do. I don't agree with Mr. Tripathi at all. If UP has taken a call to say that I will set up a migration commission to deal with my migrant labor of 23 lakh people, what is wrong about that? And the point is that nobody knows what will happen to this migrant labor when they go back to Maharashtra, Gujarat, or any other manufacturing state. So, if migrant labor is given insurance cover, if migrant labor is given, if migrant labor is being given,
let him complete his point. Let Badri complete his point. I'll come back to both you gentlemen for a reaction. Go ahead, Badri.
If the UP government wants to set up a model for dealing with their labor in different states, what is wrong about that? I don't think. Yes, you may, both the gentlemen may, cite laws, this law doesn't work, or Schedule 9 doesn't work. This is not the issue. Issue is how practical are you as a leader there, either as a bureaucrat or as a politician. If your skills are being mapped, even in quarantine, if the skills are being provided, what is wrong with that? I don't
Okay.
think there should be anything wrong about it. So, for example, Karnataka is opening, schools as well as temples, churches, and everything on July 1 or June 1st. So, depending upon the situation there, the government would have taken a call. Both bureaucrats as well as politicians are there. So, point is this, that okay, it's easy for all of us, perhaps being out of the system, to say that okay, this should not have been, this should not have been. My guess is you have not seen an epidemic like this ever in our lifetime. So everyone is trying to experiment with the system or trying to take a call on this spot. Let's be more compassionate and considerate rather than just junking it off. I don't think so.
Okay, all right. So both gentlemen wanted to react. I'm running out of time on the
Just a
program
small
as well.
point.
One at a time, and also given your closing comments with the best
Yeah.
way forward as well. Yes, Mr. Tripathi.
Just a small point. It's very good approach to set up a commission to look into the problems of the migrant labor. It's very good thing to create employment opportunities. Very good thing to train them. But the issue is the right to movement and right to profession. To impose conditions that they cannot go out of the state and to impose condition over another person to not to employ, that would create problem. I was only pointing out at that. All other things, of course, and what is being suggested, it is not that in last 73 years in UP, employment opportunities other governments did not think of. They did not think of providing skill. They did not think of employment opportunities. So all the best to them. But in spite of that, for a state of 22 crore population, it is at least in foreseeable future, it is not possible to provide gainful employment to all of them. So that should remain in the mind and the focus. Do
Okay.
everything possible to create facilities and to create employment by all means. All past governments have also been trying. Now, as for future, I am saying that we have had almost 60 days of lockdown. The government of India should take an overall view and consider and see that people are responsible. After all, you have to treat people responsible. They are the
Right.
ones who are voting you into power. You cannot treat them as totally irresponsible and children. So if you consider people are responsible, you give the guideline that people should behave like this, and let the states and the local authorities have a light touch rather than imposing a very strict control on the lives of the people. That's all
Okay.
I say.
All right, Mr. Malhotra, closing comments from you.
Yeah, Mr. Frank, I think both the co-panelists, they have made a very valid point, but in a different perspective. This is my understanding. Yes, what we are dealing with an emergent health situation. If that is the ground, then obviously some immediate measures needs to be taken, for which Mr. Tripathi has rightly pointed out what steps need to be taken. And already we have undergone a lockdown for more than 60 days. If that has happened, I think we have prepared ourselves, and time has come when we have to open up and give opportunity to every man to explore the possibility with regard to education, with regard to employment and other things. And in that direction, so far as the long-term measures are concerned, I think Mr. Badrinath, the point which he made for the constitution of a commission and other things to be looked onto, they're all from long-term planning perspective. So that point is also valid, and this point is also valid. Immediate need, and after immediate need, what need to be done in the long run, because of the damage which has been caused to the whole social and economic fabric of the, not only of the country but of the whole world. I mean, we know we are not alone. Our country is not alone in this. The whole world is suffering. So if certain long-term measures are to be taken, they need to be examined separately. So for a short-term measures are concerned, for that I think we have already prepared ourselves during the lockdown period of 60 days, and a time has come when we should plan as to how we have to open it, so that the fundamental rights which were curtailed because of genuine reasons now can be restored, and people can start their working in the normal way as they were doing prior to the coronavirus.
Absolutely. And Badrinath, close the show for us with your quick concluding remarks in 30 seconds, limited time on the program.
The point I'm trying to make is that if the previous governments have done their job properly, then perhaps this kind of a migrant labor issue would not have cropped up at all. Secondly, playing politics in the name of worker is not the right way to do. Bureaucrats also, some of them, getting into this kind of a thing is not the right kind of the things to do at all. Third issue is, yes, every government is empowered and it needs to take a call on the spot rather than looking up to the center for seeking guidance. Yes, guidance is fine. Coordination is fine. But center, I agree with that center should not have overruling or overriding power to deal with a situation. And today it doesn't, it is not doing it. And everyone knows it. So everyone is trying to deal with the situation. Let us understand that and proceed further. No one wants everyone to be, close behind the wall forever. No, that's in some case.
Okay, all right. On that note, then I'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. What's coming out of this discussion is that we need to see better coordination between the center and the states. This is a learn as you grow process for all of us. It is an unprecedented time. So everything is experimental and we have to ensure that we put our best foot forward and also ensure that the fundamental rights of the people are restored is what the panelists are suggesting. With that, it's a wrap. See you again next time.